Okay, picture this. A university that doesn't ask about your family's bank account, but instead bets everything on your future potential. Sounds pretty radical, right? Well, that's exactly what the Africa Leadership University is doing. And today, we're going to break down the case study to see if this incredible bet is actually working. So, to really get what they're doing, you first have to understand just how massive their mission is. The African Leadership Group isn't thinking small. They've set this absolutely huge goal to develop 3 million ethical and entrepreneurial leaders for Africa by 2035. Yeah, 3 million. That's not a typo. But, a goal that big slams right into a problem as old as time: money, right? How on earth do you fund an ambition like that without just burying an entire generation of students in crippling debt? That's the giant puzzle ALU set out to solve. So let's talk about Africa's grand challenge. Before we can really appreciate their solution, we've got to understand the problem they were up against, this looming crisis in higher education. For so many bright young people, a university degree just felt completely out of reach. I mean, just think about the roadblocks here. First, there's a serious lack of top-quality universities. Then you've got tuition costs that are just way too high for most families. And forget about loans, because banks want collateral that most people just don't have. And here's the kicker: even if you somehow manage to jump through all those hoops, you might end up with a degree that doesn't actually match what employers are looking for. It's a system that's just not working for a lot of people. All right, so that's the problem. Now for the solution. ALU's radical bet. They're investing in potential, not pedigree. This is where the Africa Leadership University, or ALU, and its founder, Fred Swaniker, step onto the scene. And they didn't just want to tweak the system, they wanted to tear up the rulebook and start from scratch. And this quote, this is the core of their entire philosophy. We view our students as investments, not as customers. That one sentence changes everything. See, if you're a customer, the deal is done when you get your diploma. But if you're an investment, well, now the university is only successful if you are successful, long after you've left campus. Their skin is officially in the game. So what does this look like in practice? It's a model called an income share agreement, or ISA, but they call it pay it forward. And the idea is actually pretty simple. The university says, hey, we'll cover your tuition, all of it. In return, once you graduate and get a decent job, you'll pay back a small percentage of your income for a few years. And here's the most important part. If you don't get a job or don't earn enough, you pay nothing. Suddenly, all the risk shifts from the student over to the university. It completely flips the script. Okay, so let's break down exactly how this works. What does the pay it forward promise actually look like for a student on day one? All right, here's the play-by-play. First, an investor or a fund covers 100% of your tuition. You don't pay a thing. Then, after you graduate, there's a grace period. No stress, you have time to actually find a job. Once you're employed and making money, you start paying back that fixed percentage. But, and this is the absolute game changer, if you lose your job or your pay drops, the payments just pause automatically. That safety net is baked right into the system. Let's make this a bit more real, though. Let's say there's this incredibly smart student from a rural village in Kenya. She's got huge ambitions, but no collateral for a bank loan. In the old world, her story probably just stops right there. But she applies to ALU, and they don't see a lack of collateral. They see pure potential. And she's in. So she graduates and lands an awesome job in tech. Now, that small percentage she pays back every month, it isn't just paying off a loan. That money goes straight back into the pot to fund the next student who's just like she was. It becomes this amazing revolving fund built entirely on success. Her success is literally paving the way for someone else's. And this is where you can really see how different this model is. Look at this comparison. A traditional loan? All the risk is on you, the student. A scholarship? Great, but they're super competitive and hard to get. But the pay-it-forward model, it's a whole different beast. And the most important row here is the last one, incentives. For the first time, the university's financial success is perfectly aligned with the student's career success. They need you to do well. That changes the entire relationship. So that all sounds great in theory, right? A beautiful idea, but this is a case study, so we've got to look at the numbers. It's time to check the scorecard. Did this big, radical bet actually pay off in the real world? Well, here's the headline number, a whopping 85%. 85% of ALU graduates land a job within just 6 months of graduating. Now think about that. In a model where the university doesn't make money unless its students make money, that number isn't just a nice stat. It's everything. It's the proof that the whole system works.
And the story gets even better. It's not just about that high employment rate. We're talking about thousands of students getting an education they never could have accessed before. And it gets better. Their alumni aren't just getting jobs, they're creating them. They've gone on to raise over $5 million in capital for their own startups. The impact is just multiplying.
Okay, but is this model completely foolproof? Of course not. No innovation is. It's easy to just focus on the wins, but if we're going to do a proper analysis here, we have to get real about the big challenges and the criticisms. Because, the real world is messy. For example, how do you even track income when a lot of the economy is informal and cash-based? What do you do when these ISAs exist in a legal gray area in a lot of countries? And the big one, what happens if a whole class graduates right into a major recession? These are really tough questions, and they all point to the biggest, most complex problem of all, the ethics of the model itself. And this is where things get really complicated. See, there's this core ethical dilemma at the heart of the model. Critics argue that while it's creating all this opportunity, it might also be functioning as something else entirely. A tax on success. Think about it. The graduate who becomes a super successful entrepreneur or a high-earning engineer could end up paying back way, way more than their tuition actually cost. And that extra money is being used to cover the students who didn't earn as much. So the big question is that fair? So let's get to the verdict. Is this a fair model or a flawed experiment? This is where we have to weigh the evidence and ultimately where you have to decide what you think. So you've got two very different ways to look at this. On one side, it's a shared investment in potential. It's unlocking opportunity for thousands of people who would have been left out. And it brilliantly aligns the university's goals with what students actually need to succeed. But on the other side, you've got this idea of a tax on future success. It asks the highest earners to shoulder a much bigger burden and creates a system where two grads with the exact same degree could pay vastly different amounts for it. So I'm turning it over to you. As the analyst looking at this case study, what's your verdict? When you weigh the incredible opportunity this creates against the very real ethical questions, what's your final call? Is the pay-it-forward model a revolutionary blueprint for the future of education? Or is it an unsustainable experiment that puts an unfair burden on its own biggest success stories? Let me know what you think.